Hello, hello, hello! Welcome to Insureblocks Open Source episode 28. And I've got returning to this wonderful show, Mark Simpson.
Hey, everybody.
And Rory Unsworth.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Rory. Rory, how about you tell us, what is it in the news that you found interesting this week?
Ooh, I'd love to, Mr. Waleed. So what you can see behind me is cartoon software called Toonly. So, you can make cartoons and it's all sort of modular. And we all know we're in the attention economy. And if you can increase the likelihood and reduce the time that someone takes to receive your message, then it's more likely that your message will do its job, right? Will be a successful message. So Toonly is reasonably easy to use, even for me. I've been using it a lot to prepare for the launch of my Simplifier platform. We don't have a lot of money in this startup, so we can't pay filmmakers. So Toonly is a very good alternative. But more importantly than quality, actually, it has this wonderful business model. And I want to talk in my wonder about, business models a little bit. So it's pretty cheap. The licensing is flexible, so you can cancel at any time. And if you want to be a frequent user, they run and you can share tips with everyone and you can ask for new characters and objects. So of course, in the pandemic, they've introduced the option for all the characters to wash their hands and to put on masks. And there are great tutorials. Anyway, films are often better than texts or PowerPoint. So think about it. Probably more high. For me, Toonly was a great experience, and I'll put a link to it in the thread.
Excellent, excellent. And I'm sure a lot of the startups who are listening will probably have a go at it. So thank you for that. Mark, what is it in the news that you found interesting this week?
Well, a link to Rory and his hand washing. It was an article I was reading from Xerox around how digital transformation can help healthcare organizations, particularly as they're struggling during the pandemic. Because what's interesting is, like many industries, maybe like insurance as well, or definitely like insurance, the adoption of digital has been slow. And in fact, in the printed healthcare forms and paperwork actually increased by 11% back in 2018. And so patient data is trapped in paper silos. Sound familiar?
Yep.
Absolutely. So what's interesting is during the pandemic, what's happened is a third of healthcare companies have actually slowed down their digital transformation efforts in favor of revenue generating activities. So the pandemic has changed how they're tackling digital. Why might that be? Well, here's a stat that just blew me away. Healthcare has been impacted by the pandemic to the tune of around $50 billion a month for US healthcare providers.
Wait, 50, not 15.
50 billion a month, right? It's just phenomenal. And now things are going to change because next year there's the Cures Act. And so the idea is that organizations have to meet their regulatory requirements and secure access to electronic health records through mobile apps for patients. So that's an interesting one. And we've seen a few reports around blockchain could help. I mean, it's estimated, one of the reports I've read, that blockchain could help, again, the healthcare industry, just scary numbers, by up to $100 to $150 billion per year by 2025 because of breaches, IT costs, ops costs, support costs. Just phenomenal. I mean, it was just one of those stats that just blew me away.
That's crazy amount of money. Well,
yep.
Thank you for sharing that. Rory, what is it in the news that made you wonder this week?
So Mark mentioned Xerox, right? And mine is squarely in the world of printers too. And it's the vulnerability of printers. That's wonder of the week. And in contrast to Toonly, which was my like of the week, a lot of printer companies still have this nasty gouging business model. It's a business model often very lawyer friend heavy and goes along with the notorious razor and blade model, where the printer is sold at less than cost of less than cost. But in the week you run out of ink, you need to move around your family budget, basically. I'm sure we've all felt that quite strongly during lockdown. We were printing homework and all that kind of stuff, particularly you, Waleed, with your two daughters. But anyway, it's not so much the cost, it's the vulnerability that made me wonder this week, following a great article by Dr. in EFF, which is the Electronic Frontier Foundation, which is really an amazing publication. Anyway, apparently printers are really easy to hack, and some printer companies spend a lot more on lawyers than they do on security. So that's it from me.
Excellent. Well, I would say stop using printers. Get your kids to use your iPad. The problem about that, though, is that you lose your iPad, and when you do get it back, a lot of files you had suddenly are missing, which is not a lot of fun. But yeah, Mark, tell us, what is it in the news that made you wonder this week?
So that was kids hacking what you're doing. So that, I guess, is the interesting one. And this isn't a scary kid, but it's an article I read in MIT Review yesterday, and it's really around the way that we train AI is fundamentally flawed. So the process that's used to build most of the machine learning models today can't actually tell if they're going to work in the real world or not, which is a big problem. So there's been a group of 40 researchers across 7 different teams in Google, and they've identified that what they believe the major cause for the common failure of things working in the lab and then not working in the real world is something called underspecification. Now, if you're a statistician, that's something, there's a term that might be familiar to you in statistics. So the observed effects can have many causes. So, some of the things that they found, for example, is when you build machine learning models, you test it on a large number of examples, and then you test it on a bunch of similar examples that may not have been seen. But the problem is that's a really low bar. So again, the problem is the models can't actually tell what's going to work in the real world. So a good example is Google trained 50 versions on an image recognition project using ImageNet. And the only difference between the training runs and the real runs were they used different images, some blurred, some other things. And they tested it with a bunch of AI, and generally they all came back with about the same standard results, but they were all failing for different reasons. So when you release it out into the wild, things don't work so well. So they've come back. This I loved as a statement is we might need to rethink how we re-evaluate our neural networks, because there's some significant holes in the fundamental assumptions we've been making. I suggest that will be we must. But what it got me really wondering about is, well, how closely are insurers actually looking into AI testing from a range of perspectives? So from a product liability point of view, and their own use and accuracy. And are we actually going to see a rise of new services and products to reduce the risk of AI-induced errors?
Is there actually insurance products today for AIs?
Well, I'd suggest it comes under product liability.
Right.
I mean, there are certain things that there are, again, legal structures, and Rory will know a lot more about me, but good old GDPR, for example, comes in here. You've got a right as a data subject that it's not a fully autonomous decision on this, but on a number of other things, AI is built in, but I think there'll be greater scrutiny over the testing of it. I mean, there's a great example, again, from Google Health doing some stuff earlier in the year, some tests in Thailand that worked great in the lab, and then out in the field, they didn't work particularly well at all. Now, it's early stages for sure, but it's definitely going to be an area of concern.
Yeah, because at the same time, here in the UK, you had Babylon, who supposedly did really good, against humans in being able to come to diagnostics. But yeah, I guess it's interesting as the AI has become more and more implemented, how the insurance is going to be able to insure those products, because they're going to need some really specific skill sets to be able to review this code and to be able to review how the AI responds to different circumstances, especially with regards to those holes you're mentioning.
Yep. But if they don't, they'll be pricing blind. We're back to the same old problem. So insurance companies, they have to understand risk.
Exactly.
Brokers have to understand risk. Underwriters have to understand risk. So I see the maturing happening, but I just wonder how big a focus it is.
Great. Excellent. Well, I'm going to thank you both, gentlemen, for always providing some great, interesting and news, and also things that made you wonder. If you'd like to join us in our next show, please don't hesitate. Send us a comment below, or feel free to send us a direct message. We'd love to have you on the show. But for now, we're going to wish you all a wonderful rest of your evening or day, and we'll catch up with you next week. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Thanks a lot, Waleed.